About a year ago, when I first launched the channel, we started with a video on the unboxing of the Ribble CGR Ti. Now, I'd always had it in my mind to do a long-term review of this bike, but unfortunately earlier in the year, Ribble updated the frame to the drop seat stay version to bring it in line with the carbon and the aluminium versions of this bike. At that point, it made me kind of wonder how useful a review of the bike might be. I mean, how useful is a review of a bike that you can't actually go and buy anymore? But after doing a little bit more research, it turns out it's the same manufacturer, and actually the geometry is pretty much exactly the same. So I think it's probably still worth talking about how well this bike works for the types of riding that I've bought it for, as geometry is obviously a really important factor in that. Now, I can't pretend that I'm out there riding loads of titanium gravel bikes, so what I'm going to talk about here is not really going to be a comparison of what's out there on the market. What I'm going to be talking about here really is a how suitable was this bike for the type of riding that I wanted to do. How does it compare to the bike that I was doing this type of riding on before I bought the Ribble? And lastly, I'm going to be talking a bit about what I've done to this bike to make it mine. So what have I changed from the stock setup? Hopefully you'll find this useful, and it might help you making some choices going forwards on what your next bike might be. One little note before we get into this is that I've had to record this video over several days, so if it comes across a little bit disjointed in places, apologies for that, but needs must. A bit of context before we get going. So there were two areas that I wanted this bike to mostly fulfill for me. One was long distance, predominantly road riding, odaxing, so really 200k plus type rides. So I was looking for something with some reasonably comfortable geometry and a frame that was forgiving in terms of a little bit of flex. The second thing then was some light off-road riding. So I was looking for something that was going to give me reasonably wide tyres, again a little bit of flex in the frame, and geometry that was going to give me confidence off-road, be that maybe either rough terrain or maybe some steep descents. A gravel bike obviously fits all of those kind of things quite nicely. Having something that had mud guards as well and things like rack mounts was also something that kind of ticked a few boxes just around kind of versatility. I was buying this bike to replace my Singular Kite, which is a steel cyclocross frame. I've ridden that one for quite a few years. I actually built that one up as the kind of, if you like, the original gravel bike, because I thought it'd be really good to have a compact road front crank, a 5034, and then I paired that up with an XT rear mech and XT cassette, which is pretty much what you get now in a gravel group set. That was actually about 6 or 7 years ago I built that bike up for that purpose. So that sort of foreshadowed quite a bit actually, I suppose, where the industry decided to take it. That bike had served that purpose really well, but there were a few things I was starting to become unhappy with. Primarily not having disc brakes. I was been really used to having disc brakes on my mountain bikes for so long, and honestly, I'm not going to get into a debate over that, but as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, they're just better. I wanted the ability to go bigger tyres on that bike than I could fit on the Kite. As well, things like mud guards, I was fed up, right, of the clip-on SKS mud guards that I had on there. Man, they're just rubbish. You know, even good clip-on rubber guards are still rubbish. Fine, disagree with me, hit me up in the comments below. First impressions of the ride of this bike weren't anywhere near as positive as I honestly might have hoped for. All the problems for me really centred around the front end. So there was a couple of things here. Firstly, the front end felt very light. I think that was really just in comparison to the Kite steel fork. It's bound to feel heavier. But what this did is it made the front end just not feel particularly planted on the road. The second problem I had was that I felt that the carbon fork was a little bit harsh and didn't really take out the road chatter enough for me. Now again, I think this was probably an issue around being used to the steel fork that just had a little bit more flex in it. But both of those issues added up together to give me the impression of quite a kind of jittery, light front end that I struggled with confidence on when I was cornering quickly. So that took me a little while to get used to. Now, the other thing I did as well around that is I actually dropped 10 psi out of my front tyre, and that made a huge difference as well. So what I would say with this is that I don't think actually that the fork is kind of harsh. I think it was really just me coming from years riding the steel one, and it was just that kind of transition from one material to another. I think potentially for most people buying a gravel bike, you're probably coming from a road bike that's maybe got an aluminium or a carbon fork already, and as such, I suspect you won't feel the same as I did with that. Now, it took a couple of months to get across that hurdle, but now I'm there and I kind of understand the feel of this bike. I've got the confidence in it, particularly cornering at speed, and actually I could switch between the two bikes and not have any kind of negative reaction to that. I know what to expect from it, I know how it feels, and I actually quite like the ride of that now. So I've done ode axes all the way from 200 to 600k. I've done multiple big back-to-back days, and yeah, the frame has been absolutely comfortable. I've done a range of different off-road type riding on that. So I've done what you might call very traditional gravel, what I think most people buy a gravel bike for. But then I think I've also as well done a reasonable amount of riding on terrain where, say, a hardtail mountain bike wouldn't be out of place. So I think I pretty much have pushed it, and to a certain degree that was deliberate on my part. I wanted to see how it handled, a bit rougher and a little bit more technical. And it was absolutely great. I mean, the higher front end gave me some confidence on the steeper descents. I'm not running a dropper post where I would have done on my mountain bike. So there was a little bit of sort of getting used to slightly different sort of body position of being even further back, you know, arse over the end of the saddle on a few occasions. Once I got used to the front end, like I mentioned, I had absolute confidence in riding this bike quickly, off-road, on descents, on the flat, taking on rocks, going down steps, those sorts of things. The other thing that I think is probably worth talking about as well is that I actually use this bike for club runs as well. So Thursday night bash rides, the fast ride, it's been absolutely suitable for doing that as well. Now, I'm not going to pretend like this is some kind of snappy road bike. It isn't that at all. And if that's what you're looking for, this isn't the bike for you. But if you are looking for a single bike, then I think this bike does do all of those things perfectly adequately. Yeah, so on the whole, I would say that in a very general terms, this bike has been actually really good for what I bought it for. I mentioned that I've changed up quite a bit from the stock kind of finishing kit and whatever that came on this bike originally. I wouldn't read too much into this. This is actually the first full bike that I've bought in many years. All my other current bikes are built up from frame sets. So in that sense, I kind of know what I like, I know what I want, I'm used to doing that. So customizing the parts on this bike was always going to happen. So like I say, I won't read too much into it that the stuff that came on the bike was bad. It just wasn't what I was necessarily looking for long term. The main big ticket item that I changed or had in addition to with this bike was a second set of road wheels. The wheels that came with it were the Mavic All Roads. These are a tubeless rim. They came with the tubeless tyres, the Schwab G1. These have been really good. I have no complaints about these whatsoever. They didn't come set up tubeless, of course, which is absolutely no surprise. They do come with all the valve core and all of that though, so you can set that up tubeless yourself reasonably easily. Well, as easily as any tubeless setup, I guess. These came with 160mm rotors front and back. These rims have been absolutely fine off-road. Stiff enough, flexible enough. Yeah, can't complain at all about those. The road wheels that I went for are light bicycle 46mm deep section carbon wheels. I've got these on DT Swiss 350s. Of course, I could have gone for the 240s, the lighter version, but for me personally, diminishing returns really on the extra investment. The only real difference between them is they're a bit lighter. The 350s use the star ratchet system, which I've used before on the mountain bikes, which I've been very happy with over sprung pawls in the free hub. I also didn't go for the upgrade, which is an option on the star ratchet for the points of engagement. I kept it at the lowest one. A, this is cheapest. B, I think on a road bike you're going to notice it a lot less than on a mountain bike, and I just didn't really see the point in spending the extra money for that. These wheels have been great as well. Again, nicely stiff. These came with aero spokes as well. Service from Light Bicycle was excellent. They kept me informed at all the stages. Originally I ordered 6-bolt rather than centre lock, and they couldn't get any 6-bolt, so they came back to me and gave me free adapters. I also asked them actually for things like free rim tape because of it. I also asked for spare spokes as well, because that was another thing I thought, you know, these ended up being centre pull instead of J-bend, and I don't know, centre pull spokes seem to be something that a lot of shops have less stock of. So I thought, right, you know what, if I can get out of them a couple of free spokes of each of the sizes used so that I've got my own spares, then that'd be great. In terms of the tyres I've been running on these wheels, I've been running 2 different sets of tyres. Both are the Continental Tour Ride. I've been running the 28s and the 32s. These tyres are really a tour tyre, not necessarily a road tyre, but they are immensely puncture resistant. Like, I have had so little punctures. I mean, apart from that ill-fated 400 in September, the previous puncture that I'd had before that was 10 months. Was 10 months before. So I find them extremely reliable. Now, I've been switching between the 28s and the 32s depending upon the type of ride. If I was going to do mostly a road ride with a bit of off-road, or maybe that's got what we might call good gravel, then I would probably still go with the road wheels, but go with the 32s. If I'm doing a pure road ride, then a lot of the time I would just stick with the 28s. The extra little bit of tread on these tyres is great for that little bit of off-road. You sort of still have the confidence leaning into corners, that type of thing. And honestly as well, I think particularly in the winter, a lot of the back lanes that you're riding on doing ODAX routes, they aren't the best roads. Yeah, they'll often be covered in mud from farm machinery. They'll often have a lot of field wash off just from the rain. So having a tyre that's just got a little bit more grip, in my opinion, I find good for me. The other thing to mention about wheels is I've also had a dynamo wheel built up, and I'm using the 12mm Shutter Precision dynamo hub, and I had that built onto the same light bicycle rim that I ordered at the same time as the wheels. I've used the Shutter Precision hubs for many years now and not had any problems with them. But in the interests of balance, I do know several people that have had issues with them, mostly with just the bearing life. I find dynamo lighting really good, really useful. I pair the dynamo up with a exposure Revo and the exposure Red Eye. I've got a couple of other exposure lights as well. I'm not going to get too much into the dynamo stuff right now because I'm planning on doing a separate video on my whole dynamo setup. But yeah, I really like a dynamo. Like I said, I've been using them years and I don't see any reason right now that I would ever move away from them. Main areas of change I would suggest on this bike are the contact points. Now, there's absolutely no surprise there whatsoever. Starting at the front end, I changed up the handlebar straight away to a Salsa wood chipper. This is the bar that I've been using on the Kite for many years. I find it really comfortable. I really like it. I do acknowledge though it's a bit kooky in comparison to your average road bar. And actually it's quite different to a lot of the sort of normal flared gravel bars as well. So there's a couple of things I particularly like about this bar. I like a flared bar because I like a nice kind of wider base at the front, gives me a bit more control. I feel a little bit more confident with it. I really don't like riding in the drops on normal road bars because I feel like my shoulders are always kind of like squashed in on them. Again, maybe this is something that I would get used to if I gave it enough time. Maybe it's something maybe coming from doing so much mountain biking and having the kind of wider position on a flat bar, like whatever the reasons are, it's something I like. Also as well, in that drop position, I think there's actually two positions I like riding in. One is near the end of the bar, and then the other is right up in the hook. And I find those both comfortable, and it's nice to have two different positions there when you're riding long distance. The hood's position on this bar as well is probably a little bit different to what most road cyclists are going to go with. I think my hoods are somewhat further forwards, kind of round the hook, and they're probably a slightly lower position than many hoods positions. And also as well, because of the flare, the hoods kind of angle inwards, and I actually really like this as well because I find it just easier on my wrist than a sort of straight grip. I prefer my hands being a little bit more sort of tilted inwards. Another thing to note is the way I've done the bar wrap. So around the bottom of the hook, right in the drop, is a double bar wrap, so there's an extra little bit of padding there, but above the brake and round to the tops is a single wrap. I did try double all the way around, but I just found it too thick and big on the tops, and it just wasn't for me. What I like about having it in the drops though is that when I'm off-road, particularly if you're getting a little bit more speed up, I will tend to be riding in the drops. So having a little bit of extra padding there is just makes it a little bit easier on your hands. The other thing I changed on the front end was the stem. It came with a 100mm flat stem, which was okay. I did try that out first, but I wanted a little bit more height on the front. So I changed that up to a 90mm 30-degree riser Ritchie stem. This is the same one I've been running on the Kite, and again giving me a little bit more of an more upright position. Is just more comfortable as far as I'm concerned. And also as well, I've mentioned before about the confidence off-road. I think having a slightly higher front end has helped with that as well. I swapped out the saddle and seat post. I just went for the SDG Bel Air, which I've run for years. Still finding that comfortable. The seat post is a Control Tech. I don't really know that brand at all. This seat post was gifted to me by a mate. Just so happened that when this bike turned up and I realised I didn't like the seat post that came with it because it had too much layback, I had one there and I've just stuck it in, and it's been there ever since. In terms of pedals, I'm using the set of SPDs, actually mountain bike pedals, the XTR. Given the fact that all my other bikes have got that type of pedal, and I've got a bunch of shoes with that type of cleat in them, there was no point in me spending more money on more shoes, just completely unnecessarily. In terms of group set, I went with the 105. I think this is a really good sweet spot for value, weight, and performance. In terms of gearing, I've got standard 3450 on the front. On the rear, I run two different cassettes. Now, an 1130 came with the bike, and for the vast majority of your kind of average road rides, I think that's absolutely fine. I do have an 1140 cassette though that I will put on if I'm doing a particularly hilly ODAX, you know, a AAA, so 3,500 meters over 200k. it's nice to not have to go into the red when you're doing those sorts of distances. You can only do that so many times. So having a bigger cassette's really useful for that. The other thing it's really handy for as well is if you've got the bike packed up. Now an 1140 is certainly larger than Shimano will ever say is compatible with the rear mech that I've got on there. However, you will find numerous videos on YouTube showing how a 40 is perfectly fine. Now, a lot of those videos will also say that you need a road link to do that. Interestingly, on this frame, I tried a road link and actually it was worse with the road link. And that wasn't even me setting that up. That was a bona fide mechanic. That was my man Tom from the Gorilla Workshop. I took it in there actually to have a front hose replaced on the brake, because I don't really want to do hydraulics myself. I asked him to put a road link on while it was there. And basically he called me up to say, yeah, look mate, I would recommend not having the road link because I think it's actually far smoother shifting without it. I guess it's just something about the specific shape and geometry of the rear triangle that means that it works out fine without it. So a few other little bits and pieces. I went with the mud guards on the original order. Just thought I may as well get those at that point. I knew I was going to be using this bike in all sorts of weathers, so yeah, why not have them? One minor gripe about the mud guards and how they attach to this bike, you have to take the wheels off to be able to take your mud guards on and off. And you know what, that's such a pain in the arse. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure this could have been solved by just having some kind of like little bracket and a slightly different design of mudguard. But yeah, look, that's a minor gripe. One other thing that I would like to see on this frame, and it's no surprise this isn't there, and this is kind of niche, I would have liked to have seen bosses for a third bottle cage. I mean, I totally get why they don't have it on this one. I'm guessing that maybe their adventure frame has a third bottle cage. I found this summer that it was so hot on long rides. There were rides I was going out and doing 200 sometimes and necking 12 bottles like in a 200. So look, maybe that's just me. I ended up attaching to this a monkey clip, a monkey cage, so I could run a third bottle on the seat post. Now hopefully this roundup of what I changed on the bike and why has been at least a little bit interesting for you, if not actually useful. I mean, I totally acknowledge that it's a little bit of a unusual setup. You're probably not going to see a lot of gravel bikes necessarily set up in the way that I've got mine. But, you know, hey, maybe there's something here that you might want to try and you might like it. As ever, got any comments, got any questions, I will do my best to answer them as quick as possible. Stick them in the comments and I'll catch you on the next video.